Hello, and welcome to Hopeful Conversations, brought to you by Robbie's Hope Foundation. I am your host, Kari Eckert. Joining me today is Kathleen Yopp. Kathleen is a pediatric occupational therapist with over 28 years of experience and founder of Helping Hands Therapy in Virginia Beach, Virginia. Kathleen, thank you for joining us and welcome to Hopeful Conversations.
Hi, thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Good. So you founded Helping Hands Therapy Services in 2012 with the mission to facilitate positive growth and development using whole body, holistic approaches and both traditional and non-traditional therapy techniques that best support the child and family. Can you share where you are in your journey and why your passion for working with children and parents?
I've always been an OT. I graduated school as an OT, and what I loved about OT was there were so many different areas that you could work in. You could be a little bit of a teacher, and you're working with sensory, and you're working with children, and to me, it's all this different stuff all paired into one thing. I got into specifically doing what I'm doing now. I started my business when my twins were just little because I was like, I can't work full time and raise a family. And so I started my business from my home when they were just babies. And so it has grown into an amazing practice with amazing staff and therapists. And my son got sick I don't really remember when. He was probably about 6 years old. He's 16 now, but he has Lyme disease and developed what's called POTS and, PANS, pediatric autoimmune neuropsychotic syndrome associated with strep. And then so it's PANDAS, and then PANS is affected by other diagnoses, and then also POTS as well, which is a type of dysautonomia. And so he got really, really sick and was going into these fight or flight responses and just having extreme anxiety, extreme panic attacks, having difficulty with just life. And so we really had to put things on pause. It was right after COVID. And I went and basically got certified after I had several doctors telling me about looking into the nervous system. And I had never really looked into the nervous system before. I do a lot of sensory stuff, and I've done a lot of coaching, and I've done a lot of stuff like that, but never really looked into the nervous system. And so I got certified in a trauma technique called the Safe and Sound Protocol, which is based on polyvagal theory. And it was so eye-opening. It was like my aha moment. And so not only was I able to really have a better understanding about what was happening with my child and how the nervous system and past emotions and memories plays a role in just stress and what we do every day, I was able to take that a little bit further and really start to implement it into my practice and with what we were seeing with the kids that I work with. And so my passion has really been with these families that are just struggling, and kids that are struggling, and teens that are struggling with anxiety and all these different areas, just trying to give them the tools that they need so that they are able to move past it. So that's really where my passion is. And I said, if I can just help just one family with everything that we've been through, it'll be worth it.
Lived experience directs so much. Okay, that's super helpful. And I have questions about those different protocols and practices. So this is a holistic approach in children birth to 21. And you're really trying to look for the root causes of issues.
Yes. Yeah,
Is
and
that
just
often
really
overlooked?
a lot of times, yes. And sometimes we can't always address if there's sickness or different things, I don't necessarily, I'm not a psychologist, so I'm not going to address the trauma, but we are able to understand the role that those root causes play, right? And taking a look at and trying to see how we can get to the bottom from that aspect. So if it's trauma, how can we improve and understanding, recognizing, that it's a trauma response and seeing if we can address it from that way versus it being a behavioral response, if that makes sense.
So you mentioned teenagers. What are you seeing a lot in teenagers today in 2026?
They are stressed. So many of the kids that I see are just having extreme anxiety. They're going into fight or flight responses, which turn into, it seems like it's opposition. It seems like it's defiance, and they're avoiding things, and sometimes I want to say self-medicating with things, but they're turning to things for coping strategies that might not necessarily be the most effective in helping them resolve their situation that might make them feel better right then, but it's not necessarily getting them. It's a vicious cycle because it just makes them feel better then, but then the same thing happens again tomorrow.
Versus some positive coping mechanisms.
Correct. Yes.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So let's start with big feelings can overwhelm little bodies, but obviously big feelings overwhelm all bodies.
Correct. Yes.
And emotional regulation being the foundation to your ability to learn, to connect, and thrive. How do we break that down, those feelings?
I think that the biggest thing is that we have to be able to name the feelings, right? If you don't know what the feeling is that you're experiencing, it makes it really hard to be able to know what to do. And so a lot of times what I'm doing is, working on what does that feel like? Okay, if you don't have a name to what that is, let's talk about what does it do inside your body. And so because sometimes, anxiety and nervous can look really similar, but they might have very different triggers. And so it's understanding, what that emotion does and what it feels like in the inside of our body, and then also understanding what those triggers are, and then developing a response. Well, what could we do instead? What can we do? We have to bring the awareness. If we can connect our brain to what's going on with our body, we're able to generate a response. We have to practice those responses in the context of day-to-day activities. Your brain is not going to remember what to do in the heat of the moment. You cannot expect the brain to remember and do something they've never practiced before. The brain's always going to remember. It's going to do the same thing over and over again. It's like a file cabinet. If you've never filed it away and you open the file cabinet and it's empty. And so I talk about like executive functioning, which is the front part of the brain. That is, where we rationally think. And, when we talk to people, like, I want you to think, concentrate, tell me, we can't access that part of the brain when we're having a fight or flight response. You have fight or flight response, your body produces a whole bunch of different hormones. Fight or flight basically means that the body is responding to stress, whatever that stress is, whether it's environmental, whether it is physiological, something going on the inside of the body. Whatever that stress is, your body produces stress hormones as a response, and it has to kind of say, like, is this something dangerous that I need to worry about or not? You can't really rationally think in that moment. And so it's going to pull from whatever the memories that you've stored and whatever you've practiced over time, whatever habits, it's those automatic responses. So we practice things in the context of just day-to-day activities so we can help them to be a little bit more of a habit. So when you have these responses, your brain is able to think like, okay, is this something that I should be responding to? Yes. Okay, what can I pull from to be able to, calm myself down? And so so that's what we focus a lot on. That's the biggest thing. You have to be able to know what it is you're feeling, so that way you have a better idea on what it is that you need to do.
What age developmentally can an individual have that executive functioning?
Executive functioning, there are adults that still struggle with that executive functioning. And so we start really young with kids because again, like it's practicing. A baby learns when a mother picks them up, or when I cry, that you're going to come and you're going to pick me up and you're going to comfort me. And so it starts at a very young age, and then it constantly is developing. And so the conscious awareness really, doesn't start, I talk about like self-regulation, which is a little bit different than co-regulation. Co-regulation means is that I'm dependent on something on the outside to be able to help me to calm down, versus self-regulation is like I have the tools and I'm able to, work on doing this my own. You really aren't seeing that until like school age. Executive functioning, we work on a lot of that like middle school, age is where we really try to see if like, let's problem solve this. Let's work on that critical thinking. What do you think is going to happen? What's going to happen next? And so we can kind of work on trying to see if we can put some of these different connections together. But the executive functioning is really being able to access that part of the brain that says like, what do I do next? Really critically think, what do I need to be able to do in this moment, and making a decision. And so it's organizing, planning, and decision making. So you can grade that at any level.
So how do parents come along into this equation? Like, I love that you talk about like naming feelings. I feel like parenting, what a beautiful and like the heaviest job and most rewarding job you can ever do. But parents are stressed, and like we teach our young mothers, like we tend to our children's needs. I feel like something happens in early elementary school where like our teaching role kind of changes, and suddenly we're not naming things, but like we're expecting of our children. So where do parents and the management and the regulation come in to be healthy and rewarding for both the parent and for the child?
I mean, I think that's such a loaded question. I mean, and this is something I work on every day too, right? And so it's funny because my kids sometimes will say, "Mom, I'm wearing these patches. I had these patches that we start to use to help with like supposed to be able to help with regulating, and we kind of talk about that. Like it's what you mirror to your kids are going to learn what you demonstrate. And I tell
Model.
parents a lot of times it starts with us. If I'm not regulated, I really can't expect my kids to be regulated because they're going to feel my energy. And so even
Yeah.
if I'm calm and my face is not, so if my tone, right? So I might be talking just like this. And my kids, I talk like that a lot, right? And there's a difference between my daughter calls it my teacher voice and my stern voice. But it's close, right? They're very close, right? Like my stern, annoyed voice and my teacher voice, And so, but if they're in a fight or flight response, they might misread those cues, right? So like they might take it that like, well, mom's angry. Well, I'm not angry. I'm just being firm and I'm setting a boundary. And so it's teaching them, but it's also being aware. I have to kind of notice, I just saw like your affect and everything just changed based on the way I responded. So was my tone too, sharp? Was I too loud? Am I annoyed? What's my face look like? And my kids will say, your body, you're saying this, but your face is not. That's really hard because I try really hard to stay regulated, but my face gives it away every single time. And then I turn red. And so, so it's being aware that we are our kids' biggest trigger, but we can also help our kids to, be able to, regulate as well. So we can model calm. And sometimes all they need is for us to be that calm force. Sometimes I just need to say less and just be there because that's all they need. Our tendency is when kids are escalating that we escalate with them. And so if they get loud, we get loud. If they start to talk fast, we start to talk fast. We try to talk over them. When the reality of it is that, and I practice this a lot, it takes work. My kids start to, my daughter especially, she starts to get like worked up. And then I have to, it's okay. All right. We're going to take a minute. All right. I understand. I need you to take a minute. And so I'm basically lowering my voice, I'm softening it, and I'm slowing my speed because she can't process anything in that moment. And so it's being aware, and it's also knowing like what your kids' triggers are, right? Can you recognize when your child is starting to spiral? Can you recognize that they're starting to escalate? And again, you have to, the more aware that you are, and sometimes it's trial and error, you practice it. Okay. And if you've never practiced resetting, and so like if you can't expect your child to all of a sudden reset. So saying calm down in that moment is the worst thing in the world that you can do because, oh my God, I don't like when somebody tells me to calm down. What do you mean I need to calm down? I'm fine. I'm fine. And so our kids are the same way and they want to be seen as little adults. They do, or teens. And it's or young adults, depending on what their age is. And so, but it doesn't mean that they don't need boundaries. It doesn't mean that they don't need support. It just needs to be the right support that they need. And so, and it really is, and that's why I try to do a lot of questions, like what calms you down, what makes you feel safe. And so what makes you feel not safe? So I ask the kids these questions and then I ask, the adults, like, what do you do in this moment? And so we try to figure if we can come up with something that's going to work for everybody. So we tell the parents, you have to learn how to calm yourself first and then being aware of what's going on with your kid, recognizing the sign of dysregulation first so that we are able to see if you can reel them in before it escalates too much.
Awesome. What are the most common signs of escalating or not being regulated?
It just depends on each person. Like I have twins and one's a boy and one's a girl, and they both are very, very different. And so I have one that will shut down, right? Or like get hysterical. And I have one that gets very angry and annoyed. And so I can always tell by the voice gets loud and sharp and fast. Whereas my daughter could go either way, right? So she might get really high pitched. Okay, she doesn't yell. She gets high pitched and very, very fast and loud and almost like hyperventilating, or just completely shuts down. And once it looks like if she could run, she would probably run away. And so, and again, that's based on what their personalities are. And so I take a look at you also have to look at how do you know what your child's baseline is? is your child actually calm? Because some kids don't know what calm feels like. And I tell parents this sometimes, especially, and some parents are like this too. If you are stressed all the time, okay, that feels normal for you. I know for the longest time, I need to have a little bit of chaos is what keeps me going, right? So when some of that chaos is gone and when it's quiet, I don't really know what to do. And that feels very dysregulating. It feels really weird when my house is quiet. And so I have to make some noise because that makes me feel safe, right? It makes me feel I can't focus if it's too quiet. I need a little bit of something. Our nervous systems are the same way. And so if we're used to chaos, a little bit of chaos, or if we're used to stress all the time, when you take that away, and you've never practiced being calm, that can be very dysregulating for some people. And they will stir things up, not intentionally, but they're doing things because that's what they know. That's what feels normal to them. They have this altered sense of safety. And so we have to practice sometimes knowing what that actual safety and calmness feels like. So that way once you know what that feels like, you're able to better recognize the signs of dysregulation.
So it's not just willpower alone and just shutting down.
Nope. And sometimes it takes, if you think of it this way, the stress hormones can take up to 30 minutes to exit the body. There's things that you can do to exit quicker. But if it can take up to 30 minutes, if you have not done anything to be able to stop those stress hormones from coming, it can take up to 30 minutes for it to exit your body. And the nervous system's job is fight or flight and then to regroup. And so if you've gone into the fight or flight and all the stress hormones have been released, okay, then you have to wait for everything to, then exit the body. And then the vagus nerve will reset the nervous system to pull them out of that fight or flight response and start to reset. So then you feel a little bit tired, you might shut down and everything slows down. And so it has to work really hard to get everything back down to a calm state. So that's part of the nervous system's job, is to either, help you escape in a dangerous situation. And then once it realizes that the danger is gone, it has to help you with resetting.
30 minutes, that's a really long
It takes
time in
a long time.
2026.
Yes. I mean, and I'm not saying for every person, but and then we're talking like full blown meltdown, right? Like full blown, most of the time we're seeing that things are happening. We're starting to escalate. We're able to identify it. So you're not hitting that complete cycle. But again, we're talking for all those stress hormones to start to exit, for you to go back to complete like baseline. You might be able to calm down, but your heart rate still might be elevated. You might calm down. I mean, I had a stressful situation earlier, a conversation that I'm like, okay, I need to kind of calm down a little bit. And I heard everything the person was saying, but I felt fuzzy still. And I had to work a lot harder to concentrate, had to work a lot harder to pay attention. My breathing was still, a little bit like, increased, and so was my heart rate. Now I was calm, okay, but I had to work really hard. It took me a little bit to be able to reset completely so I could get back to a norm, so I could go on with my day-to-day activities. And so, and that's where a lot of times I tell people, when calm doesn't necessarily mean regulated. Okay. So you could be calm, but you could be still in a shutdown phase, or still in a place where you're not really able to focus because you're just trying so hard to try to keep it together. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you're able to retain information and that you're really regulated enough to be able to do what the task demands are.
What are your favorite tools to teach, say, a teenager with some of this process of just finding that better space?
Breathing is one of the best activities that you can be doing, but most kids are like, that's dumb, it doesn't work. And I think because in the moment they've never practiced it, they only do it when they're upset. And again, it's not going to work the same, okay, if you're waiting until, my son always jokes me, he's like, I have to wait. Well, yeah, you do. You have to wait because you're so worked up. Now you have to wait. But if we can start to do the deep breaths at the first sign of dysregulation, right, then we're able to reset. And so breathing, and there's all different ways to do breathing. I like box breathing, where you're taking it in and you're holding it. Like you take a breath, then you hold it, and you hold it, and that you just completely, make a box with it. So you inhale, hold, exhale, hold. You're just holding in between each of those breaths. I like that personally. That's enough. That will help with slowing my heart rate down. But anything really to intercept the thought patterns. And so like it depends on, for some people, it's a thought that comes in and their brain just starts to, loop, right? Like it spirals. And so in those circumstances, we want to do something that's going to help with intercepting that thought pattern. So maybe it's that you think of something completely different. Maybe you start to count. People think that it's counting. No, it's because you're doing something to intercept. You're stopping the thoughts. You're focusing on something else. think about, I do a lot of mindfulness. And so I used to make fun of mindfulness. I used to think, oh, that's not what it is. It's just, let's think about a time and a situation that made you happy. Okay, what makes you happy? What makes you feel calm? And I ask the kids this: what makes you feel safe? I like to sit on my bed with my dog. Okay, well, tell me a little bit about that. I sit on my bed, I have my music on, and I pet my dog. Well, tell me what your dog's doing. My dog's laying on my stomach. Okay, so what are you doing with your dog? I'm petting him. What does his hair feel like? It's soft. It's soft. What does he smell like? He smells like wet dog, or he smells like, fresh scent. Or, what else do you smell in your room? I smell my pillow because my mom puts essential oils on my pillow. Okay, great. What else do you see? I see, right, all your senses. And so we talk about this when you're calm, because you have to create a safe space. Okay, so I want you to imagine all the different things that are going on in your room. What do you see? What do you smell? What do you touch? What do you feel? Right? Think about all those different things. And you just practice that. Okay, let's go. And I want you to imagine and tell me a story about like what you see. Tell me a story about like one of the things that you did there, because we can create this story over and over again. And we have a positive association with that. Let's not talk, we don't want to have something negative, something positive. When you have a moment where you're starting to feel stressed, okay, I want you to go to that place. And I have had moms tell me that once they started to implement that, we talk about that. Oh, I want you to remember the time that we went, to the beach. Tell me what you see. And the kids are like, I remember picking up seashells. Okay, tell me about the seashells. They were sharp and pointy. What else did you see? I saw the sand. And the kids will start calm down and regulate. And so, it's because again, you're taking them back to a place. Emotion. When you have memories, your brain thinks that you're reliving it all over again, for the positive and the negative. So if you can take the body back to a place of something positive, it's going to remember what it was like during that calm situation. It's going to help the body to reset to get back to that place. But if you've never practiced it in a calm state, it's almost impossible to do that. Same thing with the breathing. If you've never practiced it, my son always like, it doesn't work. No, it doesn't work like that. You're right. And so, but we talk about that, like, in the context of something fun. Let's pretend, that you're blowing something over. How can we practice this? With younger kids, I pretend that you're a thunderstorm, pretend that you're the wind. Right? We practice dancing. What are some of the dance moves? Any kind of bilateral movement is really good too, because it's also doing, it's interrupting the thought patterns because I'm going back and forth. So maybe you do the Macarena. Maybe we do, any of these different things are great tools. It's really kind of figuring out what's the interest of the child, right? What is something that's meaningful? What can you attach that's meaning, full to you, and what do you think that you'll be more willing to do, like in the heat of the moment when you need to pull a tool, right? And that's the biggest thing, is that if they're like, this is so dumb, I'm not going to do this, probably not going to want to be practicing that, because they're not going to, practice it, in the moment. What is something easy that you think that you could do? And that's what I tell them. Let's practice some of these different things. What do you feel like would be something that you could do, like in the moment? What is something that you feel like might make you feel good? And when you ask them, I'm also giving them back power, and I'm giving them back a sense of control. Because again, at the end of the day, it's up to them. I got to teach them a tool that they're going to use, that they can see that it's going to work. So with a lot of teens, the mindfulness seems to work because, tell me about a smell that you really like. I like McDonald's French fries. Okay, let's go back to a time when you went through McDonald's drive-through, and you got your favorite food. I mean, it's finding something that's meaningful. And that's what I love about being an OT, because we use meaningful activities to bring meaning, so that we can do those functional activities.
Why don't kids learn this in school?
They don't teach it. They don't teach it. I mean, and this is I do a lot of teaching. I go to schools. I teach the teachers now, because this is something that I'm like, if we taught our students this, we would be a much healthier society. I do a lot of groups with some of the teachers. I teach them, and they actually do, before they sit down. I had a teacher, I loved it. I went there and she's like, okay, everybody, we're going to pretend that we're taking out our cup of hot cocoa. Let everybody take out the hot cocoa and let's hold it. Let's take a deep breath. Let's blow away the steam. Tell me what your hot chocolate smells like. What are the toppings that you're going to put on top of your hot chocolate? And they'll say whipped cream, chocolate, sprinkles, vanilla. I mean, there's so many different ways that you're able to integrate all the different senses and memories. It doesn't take very long. And at the end of the day, if we can implement this into our into our teaching and into our classrooms, our kids are going to be so much better because we're giving them tools that they can use in the moment.
Goodness. That, like, but you said like the stigma associated with like mindfulness, like take, it's almost like we still have that associated with mental wellness, like, but more and more of us are presenting like stressed all of the time. That's our norm. How do we break that cycle?
I tend to call it let's practice our reset, right? And so I don't, we're going to use an activity. We're going to use a 5 senses reset or a 30-second reset or a 60-second reset, because that's what we're doing. We're resetting. And so, what are their tools that you're able to use for a reset? And so I talk about like being reset, rewire, reconnect, right? So the reset is first. You have to have a reset, okay? And so, so if I'm doing a mindfulness activity, we're doing a sensory activity, we're doing a guided imagery, you could call it that too. Now you see it being on the internet as subliminal messages. I was like, what is that? I said, that's mindfulness. You're using positive words to help with resetting. Because here's the other thing too, is I tell kids, stop telling yourself that you're not feeling that way, because you are, right? We need to, because otherwise you're fighting with yourself about like, I'm not upset. I'm not upset. Yes, you are. You're upset. You're allowed to be upset. Own it. It's okay. Feel your emotions. When you allow yourself to feel the emotions, you're able to get the release. Crying is an excellent way of resetting. Screaming is a great way of resetting, because you're not going to keep screaming. Scream enough. Go get something. Go out. Break some sticks. One of my students that I was seeing, she's like, I like to break pencils. I'm like, okay, go to the dollar store, buy some pencils and snap them. She's like, it just makes me feel better. Somebody else throws ice cubes. Somebody else takes a walk and they stamp on all the branches. Somebody else, likes to tear up books. Go buy a used book. Go crumble it up. If it makes you feel better, to reset it, because the sound, what do you like about it? I like the sound, right? I like the sound. As an adult, we have something here called the destruction room. One of the best things that I did when I went, they go and you're able to, hit a TV and break things. I was throwing dishes because I like the sound of the crash. I was like, oh, that sounds really good. It's really resetting. Am I going to go and throw a dish? No, right? But it's just knowing it does give you a little bit of a release. When we throw things, we're using our muscles. It does help with, releasing, finding things that are an appropriate way that you're able to do, that you're able to implement like in the moment.
And then the rewire, let's reset.
Reset is being able to pull yourself out of the fight or flight responses. Rewiring is, once you know how to reset, you wire your brain to respond differently, right? And so again, you reset it to get yourself back into calm. Then if you figure out what your triggers are, how can we then start basically come up with a stop sign? So if my trigger is I get really anxious every time I go into a math test. Okay. So what is the truth? What is your trigger? What causes you to feel upset? I'm feeling anxious because I'm going to fail. I think I'm going to fail. Okay, that is your truth. My truth is I feel stupid because I'm not good at math. Okay, that is my truth. Okay, I feel stupid because I'm not good at math. Okay, so what's the trigger? When I have a test or I have to answer in class. Okay, what can you do instead? Or what you want to see? I don't know, I'm good at science. So your truth is I feel stupid because I'm not good at math, but it's okay because I'm good at science. So when the thought comes in, we rewire the brain to respond differently. So when the negative thought comes in of I feel stupid, it's okay because I'm good at math, or it's okay because I'm working on it. It's okay because. So what is your because? What are you going to do about it? And so we come up with a plan of what you're going to do about it. Because again, you teach your brain, okay, that when we have this response, when I start to feel, the signs coming up, right? If I'm more aware, like my heart rate is beating really fast. Okay, so what can we do instead? How do we rewire? How do we rewire that? So when we start to feel anxious, I'm going to start doing my deep breathing exercises. I already know that the reset is breathing. So the rewiring is I'm paying attention to my body cues. Okay, so that when I'm starting to feel anxious or before I go into an activity that I know makes me anxious, I'm going to practice some calming activities first so that when I go in, I'm in a better situation than I would If I'm already up here, okay, versus if I'm down here, right? If I'm up here, it's not going to take much for me to explode, right? And so we talk a lot about, I call it how big is your cup? And so I tell them, like, if you have a cup that's about this big, right? Like a shot glass, right? Like our 1 ounce cup, and it's filled to the brim, and that brim is stress, okay? So you have a cup and you fill it to the brim, okay? And then you have a bigger cup, okay? And then you take that little cup and you fill it into the bigger cup. And so it's like a third of the way full. So then you have a cup that's full, and then you have another cup that's only a third of the way full. If I put a drop, how much is it going to take for it to explode or overflow in that small cup? Not much, right? How much can I handle in my bigger cup?
A lot more.
A lot more. So we talk about resilience, right? Your resilience is that basically, when it overflows, right? And so do we want to go into an activity or stressful situation with our gut full, or a bigger cup that's able to handle a little bit more? Because it's the same amount of stress, but our capacity to handle it's bigger. And that's a big part of why we do these resetting activities, and we do these rewiring activities, so that when we're more equipped to be able to handle it, so that we can, handle a little bit more, and then we're able to bounce back. I tell people a lot of times too, like, we're going to get stressed. You're going to get stressed. You're going to get overwhelmed. That's okay. Stop. We don't need to condemn ourselves for it. Like, it is okay. You're going to get stressed. You're going to have a meltdown. Let's not stay there. If you have 10 meltdowns a day that lasts for 30 seconds, and adults have meltdowns, teens have meltdowns, it just looks different, right? It's not necessarily a temper tantrum, right? But we might yell, we might snap, okay? We might have 10 of those episodes a day. If it happens really quickly and we're able to reset, I'd rather have that than have one that lasts for an hour long, that afterwards you are done for the entire day. And that, we all know those people, like, we just had a stressful situation and now you're in bed for the entire rest of the day. That's not really functional. And so we talk a little bit about, like, when you're building resiliency, it's okay. Eventually you're going to have less and less of those meltdowns. But the parents that I talk to when we're working a lot of these strategies, that's the biggest thing, is that the meltdowns are not as intense and they're able to bounce back quicker. And eventually, they get less.
Ebbs and flows. Like, oh, even as an adult, like, you sometimes have more of those
Yes.
meltdowns or more of those stressful, and you kind of go, whoa, like, I got to take a step here and see what's going on. Like, interesting. Okay. Oh, God. There's so much. You have just like a wealth of information. And I think it's really like applicable that every human can use just to reduce the stress and to regulate ourselves. What do you want to tell us about the nervous system, or how do we want to, or where do we want to go, Kathleen? Like,
I think the biggest thing is it's knowing what's going on the inside of your body. You have to know. Interoception is huge. That's what's going on in the inside of your body. And one of the things that was really eye-opening for me is there's so many people that are disconnected with what they're feeling on the inside of their body because it's uncomfortable. And uncomfortable is a feeling and emotion as well. How do you feel uncomfortable? We avoid things that are uncomfortable. And when we shut them down, we don't realize it until the very last minute, and then we can't handle it and we explode. Right. So we have to understand that, like, sometimes we have to be a little bit uncomfortable, to feel that way, so that we know and are able to develop those coping strategies. And so the more connected that we can be with our brain on our emotions, the better we are able to cope and to be able to come up with problem solving and to be able to figure out what to do when we get overwhelmed. And that's the biggest thing, is most of the kids that I work with, like, I don't want to feel that way. I don't want to think about it. I don't want to talk about it. Why not? Because it's uncomfortable. I don't like it. I don't like how it makes me feel. Sometimes we have to allow ourselves to go there just for a minute, so that we know what that feels like again. So when we start to have that emotion coming up, we're able to do something in the moment. If we continually avoid it, it doesn't get better, right? It still comes up at that same moment, and then we explode because, again, we've never really dealt with it. This is kind of what we were going about with the root cause. I'm not going to counsel you on your trauma, right? But I am going to help you to reconnect that trauma experience makes you feel a certain way. Or when I have this certain feeling, this certain sound, this certain smell, it triggers my trauma that I had before. And so it's really important for me to bring the emotions back to, the sensations again. So I'm able to use the coping strategies in that moment. So we all need to do that.
We all do. Absolutely, we all do. Oh, goodness. This has been really interesting. I just, like, still want to learn so much about just regulation. Like, I just feel like society is just like, and me included, like, wow, why did I respond that way? Being aware. Where can people find you, Kathleen? Your Instagram is Keeping Calm with Kathy with a K.
We just started a separate Instagram page that is more dedicated to emotional regulation. And it's Keeping Calm with Kathy, and where I talk on a lot of emotional regulation strategies. We do have a website that has all tools. It's helpinghandstherapyresources.com. We have trainings and webinars and downloads. And I do work one-on-one with families and with schools, and I have curriculum, different things I come and I speak, because to me, I'm so passionate about this, because this is what we need to be doing for our kids. I mean, really, and that's where my heart is it's for the kids, but it's also for the moms, because it really does break down relationships too. And, I know just from, living through it, like, that's not what I wanted for my kids. And so the more I helped myself, I was able to really help my child so much better. And that's where I have a, reset program that's geared more towards parents. We have different programs for kids too, but just also giving the parents the tools, because, it starts with us. It really does.
Thank you for sharing all that contact information. Before I let you go, what does the world need to hear right now?
Oh, safe. It's not about, I think about, like, it's about safety, right? What makes you feel safe? This is my big thing right now that I talk about a lot of the kids, but, like, being safe. If we can feel safe, right? It's most of the things that we're dealing with that you see is about, like, safety. I don't feel safe in myself. I don't feel safe around other people. I don't feel safe in my environment. So if we can instill safety in our kids, we can instill safety in ourselves, everybody would be so much better. So we need to figure out what to do to make you feel safe.
Thank you, Kathleen, for sharing your wisdom and advice today. To our listeners, thanks for joining us on a hopeful conversation. Be sure to tune into our next episode. And until then, remember, hold on, pain ends. Thank you, Kathleen.
Thank you.